what's covered in the show, and also, of course, who I have on the show. You can listen back to all previous shows via our website. That's ttradio.org/listen back. Let me know, what topics do you want to be included in the show? What aspects of education and issues in education do you feel are important to talk about? And would you like to join me here and share your thoughts, your insights, and advice with our listeners? And if so, I'd love to hear from you. So what are we going to talk about this evening? Well, the show is going to be divided up into two parts. The first, we'll be looking at oracy and how to raise its profile in schools. We tweeted a question about this last night via our Twitter account at TT Radio 2021. Lots of great replies, and I'll be sharing some of those too. And we also have a special guest, Farida Chand, a Voice 21 oracy champion at her school, who'll be joining us in just a moment. And in the second part of the show, we'll be looking at educational charity work and highlight the excellent work done by two charities in particular in low-income regions and the developing world, what inspires them to do what they do, and the impact they are having on children in less favorable conditions. Halfway through the show, I'll play our news bulletin. The main feature today is about a group of MPs publishing a report saying that white working class pupils have been failed by decades of neglect in England's education system. And they've also objected to the use of terms such as white privilege. Now, in the midst of all of this, one professional body of teachers, NATRE, or the National Association of Teachers of RE, which is the subject association for religious education, has been accused of introducing the concept of white privilege to primary-aged children. And I'll be joined briefly by the chief executive of NATRE to respond to those accusations. And as always, everyone and anyone is welcome to participate at any part of the show. Call in, text, post on social media, just be part of the conversation. And there is an incentive for this also. I'm giving listeners another chance to win a Teachers Talk radio mug. And all you need to do is to simply call in and share with me and my guests either a comment or even a question about oracy. Yes, it's as simple as that. So invite anyone and everyone to call in, and who knows, a Teachers Talk radio mug could be on its way to you. So lots to look forward to. And we're going to start tonight's show by focusing on oracy. And I'm delighted to welcome, I think I can see her in the studio, and I think she's calling in now. Perfect timing, Farida. Thank you very much. Let me just confirm that she can hear me, and more importantly, we can hear her. Hi, Farida.
Hiya. I can definitely hear you.
Yes, you are very clear. Wonderful of you to join us today, Farida. Thank you very much for coming tonight.
No, thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
Okay, so just to give a quick introduction to Farida before we get straight into it. Farida studied a BA in theology and Islamic studies and a PGCE in education at the University of Birmingham. She then went on to study the Islamic sacred sciences in Yemen. Currently, she works at Saltley Academy as a faculty coordinator for RE and citizenship and is an aspiring lead practitioner delivering whole school CPD, and is a Voice 21 champion promoting oracy across the academy. So Farida, a great pleasure to have you with us this evening. Thanks so much for giving up your precious time on a Wednesday night. If we can maybe just start by asking, what is oracy?
So oracy in its simplest sense would probably be defined as just speaking or verbal communication. But I suppose in a more detailed sense, I would say oracy is the ability to express yourself verbally using grammatically correct English. It could also be defined as the ability to use the correct words and vocabulary to express your opinions. But in the simplest sense, it's verbal communication.
Great. I think, do correct me if I'm wrong, but the term oracy was coined in the 1960s, I think, by somebody by the name of Andrew Wilkinson, who was a British researcher and educator. The word is formed by analogy from literacy and numeracy, and the purpose is to draw attention to the neglect of oral skills in education. So that's obviously gives a useful context to oracy. Why is oracy important, though, Farida, do you think?
In the general sense, I would say oracy is the basis of human interaction and connection. It's how we communicate. I mean, in the modern day, there are many ways of communicating. We have a lot of people now who tend to use social media platforms to communicate and who tend to communicate using things like Snapchat, even communicating just by simply posting pictures. But verbal communication is probably the most powerful way of expressing your thoughts and influencing people. So, in the general sense, I would
Mm.
say it is the basis of human interaction and communication. With regards to education, I would say education is oracy is incredibly important for improving academic outcomes. We know that oracy allows students to think correctly. When you give students opportunities to talk more, you're essentially giving them an opportunity to think, to reason, to check their vocabulary, to check their words before they actually talk. And we know that when we are able to talk about something, we know it. I mean, I
Mm.
know as a teacher that if I'm able to talk about something, I know that subject matter. If I can't talk about it, I don't understand it. So when we give students the opportunity to talk, or what we're doing then is allowing them to um, show off their understanding, embed their understanding. And we know that when we allow that to happen, it improves their academic outcomes in that they can then show off their knowledge and talk about it and write about it within their exams, or however way they are being evaluated. We also know that oracy is important when it comes to improving literacy.
Mhm.
We know that there's an intrinsic connection between oracy and literacy. Um, if evidence shows that when you give students more opportunities within the classroom to talk, to structure their talk, they are able to then write better. And again, of course, that's linked to the previous point about if you're able to write better, then of course you're able to improve your academic outcomes. And those two, I would say, are probably the two main reasons why oracy is important within the classroom. However, we know that oracy is far more important than just within the classroom. We know when we allow students to talk more, we know that it helps them in the future in terms of their access to employment when they leave school, in terms of them engaging in civic life when they leave school. And also, we know that when we give them opportunities to talk more, and it becomes second nature to them, and they become confident in that, they feel that their voice is valued. And of course, that is incredibly important, especially in terms of increasing their mental well-being, and especially in the modern in the current climate with
Mhm.
COVID and the rise of mental health issues. It's incredibly important that we allow our students to really improve their oracy, to talk more, to become confident in talking more, to help their mental well-being. Um, I mean, with going back to the point on accessing employment when they leave schools, I recently actually read a blog
Right.
by Tamina Begum. I don't know if you heard of her. She's a head
The
teacher
head
at one of
teacher,
the
yeah, that's right. I've heard of her.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. She's a head teacher at one of the schools. I think it's Forest Gate School in
sounds familiar. Yeah.
yeah, London. And in her blog, she talks about how oracy, how in the school, Forest Gate School, they're improving oracy and using that as a means to improve confidence. But anyway, in this blog, she makes reference to a BBC program that's no longer on BBC iPlayer because I have looked, called Breaking into the Elite.
Okay.
Um, which is a kind of like an investigative journalism program where they follow three individuals who come from a working class background, trying
Mhm.
to break into the elite, i.e., trying to get those high flying jobs. And the documentary, you could say, looks at the struggles of how a lot of these industries are really just interested in how people actually come across in terms of how polished they are, how they talk, how they communicate,
Yeah.
as opposed to just looking at qualifications. It makes reference to a young lady actually who's really struggling to find a job because she's got a very strong Essex accent. And it's actually, if you think about it, it's actually quite sad in that, there are so many employers out there who really are just judging you by the way you communicate and talk,
Yeah,
and not necessarily by your academic achievement. But this is the world that we live in. And really, if as educators, if we really want to equip our students to thrive in life beyond school, then we need to give them that stepping stone in improving their oracy. And really, we're not trying to get them to be posh, but we're trying to most certainly trying to get them to talk correctly and use the correct vocabulary, so that we can help them thrive.
absolutely. No, I think that's a very comprehensive response there. Thank you, Frida. And what you said there about the importance of oracy for this, for the purpose of future prospects of employment.
Yeah.
We sent out a tweet, as I mentioned earlier on, last night, and the question was, how can we raise the profile of oracy in the classroom?
Mhm.
And one person tweeted, Emma Timpson, by emphasizing that it's important to realize that 90% of the most powerful jobs in the world have links to good oracy.
Yeah.
She mentions professions such as politicians, judges, and that children need a chance to develop these skills. I'll come back to some more of those responses in a moment. But also, just to mention here, Talk the Talk, which is a charity that supports oracy cultures and strategies in hundreds of secondary schools across England and Wales, sees oracy as an umbrella term, quote, encapsulating all manner of components of the visual, vocal, and verbal modes with which we communicate every day as human beings, close quote. And what they've done here is they've also presented the three V's of what makes a successful communicator. So they've referred to the visual, what we see, vocal, how we say it, and the verbal, which is what we say. So in terms of being more specific, under visual, you have an emphasis on things like eye contact, on facial expression, on posture, hand gestures, movement, body language, appearance. Under vocal, there's an emphasis on clarity, pitch, pace, pause, projection, emphasis, and tone. And the verbal, which is what we say, a focus on stories, a quotation, jokes, rhetoric, imagery, opinion, etc. Which obviously is probably right up the street, isn't it? As the Voice 21 champion, and I was going to ask you about what that actually entails. How does that work within a school? So if you could just tell us more about the actual Voice 21 project first,
Yeah.
and then sort of if you can tell us more about how you personally yourself in that role as a
Mhm.
champion of Voice 21
Mhm.
promote oracy across the curriculum.
Yeah, so Voice 21 is a national charity that was set up in 2015 to improve oracy across schools. And what they do is they work with schools to um, educate and really improve the quality of oracy for students and staff delivering the oracy. So you'll have CPD, there's 3 stages to the training. The schools will select individuals to represent the school, i.e. the teacher champions, which is of course what I am. And these teacher champions will then have this training from the Voice 21 team, which they will then embed across into their schools through CPD, through training sessions, through just sharing of resources and
Mhm.
strategies. So a lot of the training involves the actual charity, Voice 21, sharing different strategies, sharing and highlighting the importance of oracy within the school, the impact of oracy within the school and for the students. And it's simply just that, just them equipping staff to really embed oracy, high quality oracy within the school, and sharing strategies and upskilling the staff body.
Excellent. And in terms of, I know usually we would think of oracy just in an English context. How would oracy be seen to be promoted in other subjects where perhaps it's less obvious? Maybe we could talk about, I don't know, topic subjects like art. or music, perhaps. Have you had any experience or insights
Um,
into how oracy is promoted in other parts of the curriculum,
Yeah, so we
maths even?
when we did the training, we were actually trained. A lot of the strategies were delivered through science lessons.
Oh, right.
Yeah, and in fact, today I was actually coaching a music teacher, and we spoke at some length about how we can implement oracy within music. And one of the things that we discussed was that whatever we do, whether it's maths, whether it's numbers, whether it's music, whether it's kinesthetic work in terms of drama and role play, etc., there's
Mhm.
always an element of communication that we do
That's right.
within those processes, right? And even if they wasn't, for example, even if you were just producing a piece of music, there's always opportunities to talk about that piece of music, to communicate that piece of music, and how maybe you I suppose how you created that piece of music, what processes you took when you created that piece of music, comparing pieces of music between students, and how they went about producing it. So it doesn't really matter which subject you pick.
Mm.
There's always communication involved, and there's always going to be oracy that's necessary in those subjects.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you did touch upon this just slightly earlier uh, about COVID,
Yeah.
and obviously we know that the lockdown had a huge detrimental effect and impact um, on not just obviously, but in many other areas of
Mm,
learning, of confidence in public speaking, in sometimes how to write quality essays. So maybe just specifically focusing on oracy, what did you see as having had the biggest impact, and maybe in your own sort of school context? So what do you think was the impact on oracy, and what was the priority when schools had reopened?
mm,
And children were, well, we know that schools were never closed, they were always open,
yeah.
but when children en masse were returning to school and attending
Mm,
lessons again, from a as a Voice 21 champion, what would you
mm,
say was your number one priority, and how did you set out to try and address the gaps that would have emerged because of the
yeah.
lockdown?
Yeah, of course. And there were many gaps, of course, formed due to the lockdown, because we know that the lockdown was a difficult time for not just students and staff, mainly because we know that schools are not just places where we educate people and we provide an education, but also opportunities of socializing. And during the lockdown, we know that that was taken away. You actually made reference to the three V's,
Yes.
and whilst a lot of schools were teaching via Teams and other different platforms, it became quite difficult. I think as a teacher, we realized that it became quite difficult to teach, because when we communicate, we rely on so many other things, and not just our voices. So, for example, I think you made reference to this, but our body and our voice inflection and how we say things, and
Yep.
these cues are not always picked up when we teach via Teams and online platforms. So, from my personal perspective, going back to school, and I just want to add, we don't actually have any kind of robust data in understanding how lockdown impacted
Okay.
our students, specifically when it comes to oracy, because for us as a school, it's something that we've just embedded quite recently. It's definitely been a post lockdown endeavor. But from my personal perspective, just being in the classroom, I would say lockdown had a massive impact on my students. Initially, um, it just felt like our students lacked confidence, struggled to communicate, weren't really engaging much in classes, um, just struggling to even, I mean, we're not just talking about oracy, but even literacy in terms of
Yeah.
sentence structures and things like that. Now, of course, I can't shut them up because we've had this push an oracy and really getting them talking and engaging within the classroom. We have to remember that the lockdown was a very, very difficult time for many people. I mean, if we think about it, um, if we think about it from a different angle, if you were to say to somebody, you can't leave your house for 3 months and you can't go out, you can't socialize, you can't go to the gym, you can't meet up with your friends, ordinarily we'd call that abuse, wouldn't we? And there'd be post-traumatic like trauma involved with that if we stopped all of those, normal things. But because we had a legal reason to allow those things to happen, that doesn't take away the fact that, all of a sudden there isn't going to be trauma. And we know that lockdown has led to a massive rise in mental health and well-being related issues. So of course, our students are no exception. So embedding oracy and really having a drive within the school to embed oracy and really allowing our pupils an opportunity to talk more and to build their confidence, and really getting them to understand and that we value their voice has been crucial in not just I mean, what I'm saying is not just in terms of academia and outcomes, but also in terms of their well-being as well overall.
Absolutely, and I'm just going to share before we let you go. Unfortunately, we've got quite a packed program this evening, and as much as I'd like to keep you for longer, we will have to end the segment in a few minutes. But I'm just going to share with you. I just want to get your final thoughts on some of these tweets that we've received from various teachers since yesterday. The question that we put out on Twitter was, how can we raise the profile of oracy in the classroom? So I'm just going to read some of these responses. Zara Chaudhry says, ask students what they want to talk and learn about and take it from there. Susanna Strong gives quite a long list. She says, some strategies that I know to be helpful are to ensure that staff and students are sold on the why, linked to the school vision, talks about high quality training, about establishing and embedding some structures or framework for oracy that are used in practice consistently, talks about making certain routines around oracy habitual, reducing cognitive load. Christopher Vowles says, get students to make podcasts. It's quite an interesting idea. And we also have Sarah Davies, who says about the importance of oracy, that it's important that we are open and aware of not just how important oracy is to developing our students' ability and progress, and when promoting by all subjects and all settings, oracy is a key element to evolving their learning. Lucy Bellingham tweets, embed oracy in the culture of the school through curriculum planning in all subject areas, not just the subjects which naturally lend themselves to oracy, which we just talked about. And we have also a comment from Jane, who says that, which perhaps we haven't talked about, is to raise the profile of oracy amongst the staff first.
Yes.
So, Frida, take your pick. Is anything there that you'd like to sort of pick and just a comment on?
Yeah, there's so many interesting comments there, but I would definitely say everyone needs to be on board. I mean, it's got to, you really need to know, both staff and students really need to know why oracy is incredibly important and why it's on the agenda. And we're not just talking about in terms of raising outcomes and getting the results, but from a holistic perspective, especially in the current climate. So that why, as to why it's being embedded and why there's a focus, and the staff really need to be on board in understanding why oracy is important for it to work. Yeah, definitely, that's the one that really highlights, because if you don't have your staff body on board, it just becomes a very, very challenging. And we have to understand, we know as teachers and educators, it's difficult. The workload's heavy, and really, if the teachers are not on board, it's just another thing to do, and it's going to be delivered half-heartedly. And if staff understand the importance and the significance of it, that's you've pretty much won the
Mm.
battle in trying to improve it.
Absolutely. I mean, it's sometimes difficult, isn't it? Because there's so many priorities, so many distractions as part of a whole school development plan and focus. It could be equality and diversity. It could be reviewing one's curriculum, um, SMSC. I mean, there's so much that schools have to do and focus on, and
Yeah.
oracy just seems to be one that's added to the pile. But I think, as you've emphasised this evening, it's important that oracy is seen throughout the curriculum, and it is important that for the sake of students' own confidence, their well-being, and obviously their futures, that they develop good oracy skills. So, Farida Chand, thank you very much for coming on this evening. It's been a pleasure having you. Farida Chand, who's a Voice 21 champion and works at Saltley Academy. It's been a great pleasure having you on. Thanks for being with us tonight.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Live from Birmingham, this is The Late Show with Waqar Ahmedi on Teachers Talk Radio.
Hi, if you've just joined us, welcome to The Late Show with me, your host, Waqar Ahmedi, here on Teachers Talk Radio. It's Wednesday night. This is Teachers Talk Radio, and we are live, and we will be speaking shortly about educational charities in the developing world, and also the Education Select Committee's report on white privilege.
Live from Birmingham, this is The Late Show with Waqar Ahmedi on Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live on the Podbean app or desktop player. Just head over to www.podbean.com/LSW/TT Radio or search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TT Radio.
Okay, so welcome to the show. I'm now going to play our education news bulletin read out by Megan Goods.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News with Megan Goods.
This is a Teachers Talk Radio news feature on the 22nd of June report from the Education Select Committee, entitled The Forgotten: How White Working Class Pupils Have Been Let Down, and How to Change It. The Education Select Committee have released a report claiming white working class pupils have been failed by decades of neglect in England's education system. The committee also implied the use of the phrase white privilege suggests white pupils are at an advantage, which is the opposite of the reality for poorer white pupils. The government has responded by stating it is committed to ensuring no child is left behind. Currently, 16% of white British pupils on free school meals get university places, whilst at GCSE, 18% of white British pupils on free school meals achieved a grade 5 in English and maths, compared with 23% on average for pupils on free meals. The committee chair, Robert Halfon, called this a major social injustice that should not be swept under the carpet. Some of the cultural factors and underlying social problems featured in the report as reasons for the attainment gap included a poor local jobs market and lack of opportunity, the lack of community assets and social organisations, poor local services and transport, families with multi-generational poverty, and disengaged parents with a poor experience of education. The suggestions for rectifying the situation put forward by MPs were to use pupil premium funding to provide more support, to create family hubs to get parents involved with children's learning, to attract teachers to areas that can struggle to retain staff, to ensure that work-related vocational education is available, and to find a better way to talk about racial disparities. The Department for Education responded to the report, saying, "This government is focused on levelling up opportunity so that no young person is left behind. That's why we are providing the biggest uplift to school funding in a decade, with £3 billion in recovery funding and existing plans to increase school budgets. The pupil premium is expected to increase to more than £2.5 billion this year, through which schools can support pupils with extra teaching, academic support, or activities like breakfast clubs or educational trips. The full reports from the Education Select Committee can be accessed at parliament.uk. That was your latest Teachers Talk radio news.
Introducing Amanda Davey. Amanda is one of the first specialist teacher assessors for dyscalculia in the UK and offers dyscalculia tutoring and bespoke training for schools. With 26 years of teaching and tutoring experience in the UK, Amanda offers specialist online tuition focused on building confidence and developing skills. Amanda also offers online and face-to-face training on dyscalculia for educators, informing practitioners as to how to identify children that may have dyscalculia and how to support them in class. Find out more about Amanda and what she can offer you at www.amanda-davey-dyscalculia.co.uk. Creative Resources, made for teachers by teachers. At Creative Resources, we've been rethinking what a classroom can be. We've created a huge range of more than 2,500 original and exciting resources that span across more than 15 different subject areas. Whether you're looking for primary or secondary level resources, careers options, PSHE, arts or humanities, Creative Resources have the resources for you. We offer full curriculum packages and unique, challenging escape rooms themed on topics such as Shakespeare, Tudors, and fractions. We have quizzes, task cards, Tarsia puzzles, and lots more. Better still, more than 100 resources can be accessed for free. Just visit our website, www.CRE8TIVEresources.com. You can get 10% off any order you make on our website by using the discount code TT Radio. Creative Resources, made for teachers by teachers.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. You are here with me, Waqar Ahmadi, on The Late Show. And you just heard the Education News Bulletin read by Megan Goods about the report that's been published by the Education Committee, the Common Select Committee, entitled "The Forgotten: How White Working Class Pupils Have Been Let Down and How to Change It." So this is basically a report that's been published by a group of MPs saying that white working class pupils have been failed by decades of neglect in England's education system. And they took particular exception to the use of terms such as white privilege. Let me just read out the way in which they've explained white privilege in their report. White privilege is the multiple social advantages, benefits, and courtesies that come with being a member of the dominant race. This doesn't mean, they add, that as a white person you haven't worked hard for what you have or that you haven't suffered. And in their conclusion on the note about white privilege, they state that our inquiry has shown that poor white pupils are far from privileged in education. Schools should consider whether the promotion of politically controversial terminology, including white privilege, is consistent with their duties under the Equality Act 2010. The department should take steps to ensure that young people are not inadvertently being inducted into political movements when what is required is balanced, age-appropriate discussion and a curriculum that equips young people to thrive in diverse and multicultural communities throughout their lives and work. The department should issue clear guidance for schools and other department-affiliated organizations receiving grants. Now, in the midst of all of this, one professional body of teachers, NATRE, which stands for the National Association of Teachers of RE, which is the subject association for RE, primary aged children, and has been at the center of quite a bit of negative coverage in the last few days. NATRE claims that it's been misrepresented, and I'm delighted to say that we have with us tonight the Chief Executive Officer for NATRE, Fiona Moss, who should be here. Fiona, hi, good evening.
Hi, Waqar. It's a pleasure to be here. Chief Executive Officer of NATRE, but also was a primary school teacher for 15 years.
Right, I forgot to mention that. I stand corrected. Thank you very much, Fiona. Great to have you with us. I know it's just a brief appearance tonight. I'm so glad that you have given time to be here, only in light of this being obviously very topical and being very current. Just to put listeners in the picture also, what I mentioned about the report published by the Education Committee was published, I think it was just yesterday. But even prior to this, last week, there was an article that had appeared in a national newspaper. In that article, I'll just read out some quotes because it does mention NATRE specifically. And the article is entitled, "Primary School Pupils Should Be Taught About White Privilege, Religious Education Teachers Have Been Told in a New Curriculum Guidance." And the article states that lessons should introduce children aged 8 to 11 to the key concept of white privilege, described as invisible benefits that society affords to people, quote, "because of their whiteness," close quote, according to NATRE. And they've also cited the glossary that was produced by NATRE as part of its anti-racist RE resources, in which it quotes NATRE as saying, "It's important to engage with the idea that racism is a problem for white people rather than for Black people." Fiona, as we know, there has been, or perhaps we don't know, a lot of us, a lot of negative reaction and publicity around these accusations about what NATRE has stated in some of these resources. Could you just tell us, please, whether these are true and correct?
Well, as you'll be unsurprised to know, I'm afraid we've had journalists who've not done their homework. We've had journalists who have found a word, they've looked at a professional glossary for teachers and said, "Oh, this is what they're saying they've got to teach 8 to 11-year-olds." But actually, if they had taken the time and were well educated enough to read the primary resources, they would see that nowhere in our primary resources, in what we describe, should be taught to children. Resources, can I say, that are freely offered, not sent into schools. Do we suggest that white privilege should be taught? And what's been really difficult for us as a small charity supporting teachers is that the initial article was then repeated by others on radio stations without any of them checking. And even when some media did come and check with us, we gave them a quote and then they didn't read it. So it feels like on purpose, people are choosing to misrepresent stories that are clearly not true. There are some excellent resources. Please do and go and look. They're freely available on the NATRE website. So we do absolutely make it clear that we do not say 8 to 11-year-olds should be taught about white privilege. We make it clear in our resources, in fact, that it's a contested concept for some.
Okay, so I think that was one of the things that was mentioned in a couple of the articles, that teachers were told that this is what they need to do.
No.
Right. So this
Quite
is
simple. No.
Right, fair enough. I mean, as you know, Fiona, the accusation haven't been made in just one or two newspapers. There are a number of media organizations, including broadcast media, that have repeated some of these claims that have been made about NATRE. And also, there was a parliamentary question, I believe, that was put to the Education Secretary about NATRE's resources. And also, there was in the same article published last week some quotes of what the newspaper calls experts in relation to the resources themselves. One of those was Dr. Michael Nazir Ali, the Bishop of Rochester, who, in response to what was said about the resources produced by NATRE, that the situation in the educational institutions is that white working class boys are at the bottom of the pile. So what does it mean to teach them that they are privileged? And then we also have a quote from Toby Young of the Free Speech Union, who says that teachers and teaching associations think, whether he's referring to NATO, we're not too sure, think that telling children Britain is a racist country is an incontestable fact, even though according to international survey evidence, Britain is one of the least racist countries in the world. I mean, just kind of to I suppose put this into context, there seems to be, doesn't there, a widespread concern amongst people in the media, people in politics, people in religion, about the appropriateness of the materials that have been produced. And there are also questions about what any of this has to do with RE. So is anything you could offer in response to that?
Of course, absolutely, Waqar. So what I would say there is, first of all, those so-called experts, I strongly suspect, I'd put a bit of money on it if I wasn't a good Methodist girl in my younger days, that they haven't read the resources. And that's the problem. It's written in one media outlet and it's been, frankly, lazy journalism copied in others. And unfortunately, MPs have read it, have not checked our resources, and that's where the question came from in Parliament. Notice the answer to the parliamentary question did not criticise NATRE's resources at all. You ask about the appropriateness of the resources. Well, I think people should judge for themselves. We know in the RE classroom, both primary and secondary, it's a space where questions can be explored with nuance and intelligence. So we look at questions that debate the issues related to religion and race. We look at abolitionism, for instance. We look at, well, to take the example of the Edward Colston statue that, as we know, was toppled and thrown into the harbour in Bristol last year. Rather than just debating that, we debate that from a point of knowledge. We actually look at the John Wesley statue that's there and the Colston statue that was there, and we help the pupils in primary school understand who those two people were, for good and for ill. And once the children have got that knowledge-rich understanding of who those people are, then we have the debate about whether it was appropriate for that statue to stand or to be taken down. And so they're able to have a debate from a point of knowledge. We also look at what religious texts have got to say about racism. We look at Peter and Joppa in Acts 10. There's so much stuff that we do in there. Are the resources appropriate? Judge for yourself. But do you know what? We've trialed them up and down the country. We've seen some amazing work. Yes, those resources are appropriate. And it's only sad that there are some journalists and some MPs that don't do their work well enough and haven't understood the great work that teachers do with pupils. So I'm fully confident in these resources.
And just one last question, Fiona, before we let you go. I think it's been a very robust defense. If people wanted to see for themselves these resources, yes, are they in the public domain? Do they need to write to somebody? Are they sort of hidden somewhere? And do you need special permission, have access to them? Where can these resources be accessed so that people can actually see for themselves what you're saying is true?
Thank you, Waqar. They're absolutely freely available. Go to www.natre.org.uk. Go to our front page. You can see a link through to them there. But do you know what else they need to do, Waqar? If they're a teacher in an RE classroom, primary or secondary, they need to join NATRE. Support us to produce more quality resources to support teachers.
Super. Fiona, thank you very much for joining us this evening. I know that we had an RE special a couple of weeks ago in which we did have a couple of representatives from NATRE. And I'm just very grateful that you've spared time this evening during what's been quite a challenging period, I know, for NATRE. in light of the negative media coverage. And I'm so glad that we've given the other side of the story on Teachers Talk Radio this evening. And hopefully we can have you back on a future show telling us more about the great work that NATRE does.
I would love to, Waqar.
Thank you, Fiona, for being here this evening. It's been an absolute pleasure. And like I said, all the best with NATRE, and the website, as Fiona mentioned, is natre.org.uk. If you wish to see those resources that have been in a couple of media headlines in the last few days, perhaps for the wrong reasons. So Fiona, thanks a lot for joining me this evening. Much appreciated.
Thanks very much. Join NATRE.
Thank you.
Live from Birmingham, this is The Late Show with Waqar Ahmedi on Teachers Talk Radio.
Good evening. If you've just joined me, this is your host, Waqar Ahmedi, on The Late Show on Wednesday, the 23rd of June. We've been talking about oracy in the curriculum, and also we've been speaking about the Education Committee's report on references to white privilege in education. I've just had a brief interview with Fiona Moss responding to accusation of NATRE misusing the term.
Live from Birmingham, this is The Late Show with Waqar Ahmedi on Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live on the Podbean app or desktop player. Just head over to www.podbean.com/LSW/TT Radio or search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TT Radio.
Okay, so the last segment this evening is looking at the work of charity organizations in education. It's more specifically supporting disadvantaged children and students in low-income regions and in the developing world. And I'm delighted to say that we have with us this evening, I can see he's already online, Fazl Ahmed from Humanity First. Fazl, are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Fazl. Yes. Great to have you with us this evening. Thank you for joining. And I was also hoping that we'd have Luke Simon. Luke, if you are here in the studio, if you don't mind just calling in, and we can bring you into the conversation. So we'll just see if Luke is able to join us during tonight's program. So Fazl, if I could just introduce you to our listeners. Fazl Ahmed, who has been serving as a volunteer on the board of Humanity First for over 15 years, and in the last decade as operations director. He's worked on development projects in Africa and spent a lot of time in the field. Humanity First itself is registered in 60 countries and believes in equal access to education for all as a basis to eradicate poverty. They have built over 60 countries in terms of their resourcing, provided resources to schools and students in a couple of hundred more, and started training teachers as well. They've been building sanitation and dining facilities, and their objective is to ensure that all children access and complete education. So Fazl, thank you so much for being here tonight. I was hoping that Luke would also be here because I know that you have done a lot of work in tandem with Luke Simon's charity, which is called School in a Bag. So hopefully we can come back to that this evening as well. So Fazl, if you could just maybe tell us, what was it that inspired you to get involved in this sort of work?
Well, I suppose, like many people, when you see a disaster, an earthquake, a tsunami, something like that, then you're naturally inclined to, what can I do to help? So that's where I first started getting involved. But then over a period of time, you realize that, especially in low-income regions, the people have a perennial need, and they're struggling with education, with work, with food, and so on. So that's how I got more and more involved in the charity angle.
Brilliant. And I've just given a brief overview of Humanity First. Could you maybe tell us a bit more about the work of the charity itself and the overall aims of the charity?
Yeah, so I mean, the charity started off doing disaster relief. So if you think, those of you can stretch your memory back to 25, 26 years, there was a war going on in the Balkans, in Bosnia and Macedonia and that whole region. And so we started off supporting, displaced people in that whole region. And then over a period of time, we moved into long-term projects and poverty alleviation. And initially, I suppose, like all charities, we started off by whoever was available with whatever resources they had. They'd go out, do some projects, then come back. Over time, I suppose this is appropriate for a bunch of teachers, we've turned it into sustainable development, which can only really be achieved by training the local teams to be able to do development themselves and giving them the resources and skills to do it themselves. And that's where we're now focused. So it's poverty alleviation, whether it's to do with food security or water and sanitation or education and training, and all done in a sustainable manner by empowering the local teams.
It reminds me of that old adage that you, what was it? Give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. You teach a man to fish, and you feed him for life. So I think you're sort of equipping people on the ground with those skills, as you just mentioned. So, I mean, obviously, we know that when it comes to charity work, various charities would focus on a particular aspect that they would require help and support. Some might go into health, some might go into the environment. But your charity does a lot of work in education specifically. So what made you prioritize education?
Well, I suppose we do a lot of work in health as well, but the the theme that keeps coming back is lack of trained capacity in those regions, whether it's doctors, engineers, teachers, whatever it is, there is a lack of capacity in those regions. So the root of that is education. And if
Yeah.
we can use education to increase capacity of trained people in those countries, then in all of those fields, they will be able to get themselves out of poverty. That's really what we're trying to do.
Excellent, thank you. And I'm pleased to say, I think we have Luke on the line now. Luke, are you with us?
Yes, good evening. Hello.
Hi, good evening. Great of you to join us. I just wanted to give a quick introduction to yourself. Luke Simon, who is part of the School in a Bag charity. Following a 6.5-year career designing gardens around the world, Luke took a year out in 2004, visiting 10 countries, and secured a position as the athletic director in an international school in northern Thailand. During the Christmas break on the Thai island of Koh Phi Phi, is that the right pronunciation? I don't know if I've got that right. Luke was caught up in the Indian Ocean.
PT, I think.
Is it Koh Phi Phi? Right. Luke was unfortunately caught up in the Indian Ocean tsunami, where his brother Piers was tragically killed. He set up the Piers Simon Appeal in 2005 to support victims of disasters, but used the platform to concentrate on School in the Bag from 2009. In 2019, just 2 years ago, School in a Bag became a standalone charity. It did have 4 employees, but since COVID now has 2. So Luke, could you just say a bit more about School in a Bag and the kind of work that it does? If you can help us just have a better insight into the nature of your work.
Yeah, sure. I mean, the principal aim of School in a Bag is to distribute rucksacks full of stationary learning resources and eating utensils, and to get them out to, disadvantaged children around the world. And it's a really quite a simple model, because so many of the children that we support have absolutely no resources whatsoever.
Mhm.
And our school bags have developed over time. But the aim is to really give the children the tools that they need to help them with their education.
Fantastic. So can you also share examples? And I know that yourself, Luke, and Fazal from Humanity First have done quite a lot of work together in recent years, and I'll come to that also in a moment. Fazal, if you can come back to you, could you share examples of the work that you do in terms of what your short-term and long-term goals are? And I think maybe what a lot of people are quite curious about, and certainly I'm quite intrigued about, is we're not always quite aware of the end-to-end process involved from when you identify a need, and there's a specific need for support and help in a part of the world, and then delivering that help and support to the end user. So could you tell us more about how that process works with Humanity First?
Yeah, sure. So we've first of all, hi Luke. It's been a long time since we first met about 6 years ago in our office in Surbiton.
Hi, Fazza.
Hi. With Humanity First, we start from the basis of need, and actually, what you find around the world is there are hundreds of thousands of schools that are in a pretty poor state, and not only the schools in a poor state, the teachers themselves are demoralized, demotivated, and not doing that well. And therefore, it's not a surprise when you look at the attainment in those areas is well below par. So we do a number of things. We start off by where there are existing education institutes, we would support them, we would enable them by providing them with libraries, books, computers. We do a classroom transformation program where we renovate, classrooms that are dying a death, and we would also add sanitation and kitchen blocks. So we're trying to make those schools more of a fit for purpose environment for children.
Mhm.
We also enable students. So we would provide fees, uniforms, books, stationery, and that's where we first got in touch with School in a Bag, because they are experts in part of that, they're in exactly that. We also enable staff. So we started off after Hurricane Katrina in parts of the US, trying to empower teachers in low-income regions of the US, would you believe? And now we're doing the same
Right.
across Africa and Asia, where we give them training and resources. And then finally, we've built, I think now 66 schools, and we're working with local authorities. And the next stage beyond primary and secondary is we also run 21 vocational training institutes where we're trying to provide long-term, careers, if you like, to the people at the end of the process. So it's all needs driven.
Fantastic. And Luke, how about yourself and School in a Bag? Can you tell us more about the end-to-end process?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we're just a tiny organisation, that's got a little bit smaller. So we don't have quite the really impressive stats that Fazal has just listed there. But our end-to-end process is that we partner with organisations around the world. So Humanity First are a prime example of that. But some of our charities that we partner with are tiny. And they're trying to support the education of children on absolutely, shoestring budgets. So we partner with them, we identify the need, and then we fundraise, and we run School in a Bag in two ways. We either ship school bags that have been packed here in the UK out, or we work with our partners on the ground and source stock locally. Stock is procured, put together, and then handed out. But for every project we have, there is a partner on the ground that then distributes the school bags to the children and then reports back to us, sending us a photograph of the children, because every bag is numbered. So as a donor, you can track it on our School in a Bag website. So you get to learn information and see exactly where your school has gone. So it's a very transparent model, quite labor intensive, but I think that's so important that donors get to know where their money is going. I mean, the short term work that we're doing is effectively just trying to fundraise, because we have so many requests for school bags around the world. But the long term goal is to try and rub shoulders with some of the big global organizations that are trying to work towards the Sustainable Development Goals, in particular SDG number 4, which is quality education. Because from scratching the surface on the reports that they've written, they have said that the prime goals in order to fulfill quality education in the developing world is to train more teachers and to build more schools. Well, we know that that's fundamentally important, but I think they're missing out that key third vital part, which is actually giving children the tools that they need to learn.
Right.
Because, you know, my children go to a great school here in Somerset. They have great teachers, they have great classrooms. But if you were to strip away all of the learning resources, the pens, the pencils, you know, all the technical equipment, those children, my children, would be faced with the same problems that so many children have around the world. And that is that they sit in class all day and they just try to remember the information because they've got nothing to work with.
Right.
So by giving a child a £20 school bag, we can transform the way in which they're taught and how they get their education. And then, of course, we can transform the way in which educators can then teach their children, because suddenly they've got all the items that they need. So that's our long-term goal in the next 9 years, as we reach towards 2030, to try and rub shoulders with the big organizations and say, please don't forget organizations like us, because just building schools and training teachers isn't enough.
And what does a typical school bag actually contain, Luke?
Okay, so in it, I mean, the school bag is robust and great, but you've got 6 exercise books, you've got a ruler, you've got a pencil case that we preload with biros, you've got 12 pencils, colouring pencils, a geometry set, and then you've got eating utensils, a lunchbox, which contains a spork or water bottle. And then because of COVID, we now add a hygiene kit. So there's a little wash bag, toothbrush, toothpaste, soap so that they can wash their hands, and a face mask, which we've had inner wheel ladies around the country making for us. And on some of our consignments where needed, we've partnered with an organization now that provides us with a life straw, which is an amazing device which allows children to suck up dirty water, and what goes into their mouth is perfectly clean water. So not necessary in all of our consignments, but certainly on some of the more remote places. And we've just made a decision now to start including sustainable sanitary pads in with our consignments, so that, of course, you know, when girls of a certain age are menstruating in so many countries, they don't go to school. Well, if we can combat that and address that by giving them sustainable sanitary pads, then, you know, we're helping children maintain that education and negating the reasons why they might not go to school.
I mean, that seems to be quite a substantial provision to what you find in a typical school bag. How long would that?
Hello, Waqar, I can't hear you. Hello?
I think he was trying to ask you how long your bag would last.
Sorry, I don't know. I'm stood right next to the router with full signal.
There for a moment. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now, dipping in and out. Did you ask how long would the bag last?
Yes, sorry. Yes, I was asking about sustainability of a typical school bag. Sorry, I think my Wi-Fi went, so I've reconnected, thankfully. So I'm back with you. So yes, sorry if I missed out on what you had started to say there.
No, I hadn't answered. The sustainability question is a great one. One, we know that the contents of our school bags will run out. So some of the key items, the bag is very robust and will last the child, hopefully, for the entirety of their educational days, as will the lunch boxes and some of the items. But we know pencils and paper will eventually run out.
Right.
We know that students rub out their exercise books when they finished and they start them again. And in some instances, we will top up bags, but probably not as often as you think, because some of our partners take the view that rather than topping up a bag and helping a child maybe 3 times in their life, they'd rather help 3 children by giving them 1 bag and that opportunity. And the sustainable question is a really good one, because, and my sort of counter argument to that is that, you know, when I was a 6-year-old boy learning my times tables, I used a pencil and a piece of paper. And I learned all of my times tables and I would learn my spellings. I don't have that pencil and paper now, but the knowledge that I gained from having it is still with me, you know, 40 years later. So we're often asked about the sustainability of the bags and what happens when they run out. And you know, that's my counter argument. The knowledge and the education you can gain when you have that bag is so important and can stay with you forever. So, you know, But
Great.
we've added more and more to our bags, and kept the donation price at £20 the same, because as we get bigger, we're starting to partner with more organisations that contribute more to our bags. So the life story is new, the hygiene kit is new, the sustainable sanitary pads are new, and the more we can keep giving, the more we can keep helping.
Great stuff. So how do you then prioritize which localities and countries you offer support to? So Fazal, if you can come to you for that one, because obviously there's a dire need for support in all parts of, especially in light of the COVID experience in the last close to coming up to what, 18 months or so. So imagine that the level of desperation has got worse in many parts of the world. So how do you identify how do you prioritize where the help should be given first?
Yeah, so if you start off from the need, there are qualified data sources such as the World Bank and the UN, where they show you the percentage of children in education, percentage that drop out early, the percentage that go on to secondary and tertiary education, and that gives us a clue and a pointer as to where things are slowing down and failing. And therefore, even in Africa, it's not that all of Africa is the same. It's a continent. There are pockets of really excellent education in Africa, but there are other areas like Niger or Burkina Faso or Ivory Coast in the north of the country, where, again, that's an example where if you looked at Ivory Coast, if you went to Abidjan, it's like any European city. And the schools, the lycée system that they run, the French system, is very good. It's high quality, but you don't have to go far, past Yopougon as you're heading up towards Korogo. If you go an hour out, and literally kids have got nothing. They don't have uniforms, they don't have shoes, no resources, no books in the school, classrooms are crumbling. So you go from one extreme to another literally in half an hour.
Right.
And those are the areas that we tend to focus on. It'll be the rural areas. And Luke made a really good point about girls, for example, dropping out of education. That's one of the things that you spot, the gender imbalance, and it's because of the lack of sanitary provision in the schools. And this is why we've been building toilet blocks for existing schools as well as building new schools, because these small things help children to stay in education. Similarly, providing kitchens, and I'm not talking about hugely elaborate kitchens, but being able to provide porridge in the morning means kids keep their attention span through the day. Otherwise, if they come to school hungry and it's hot, then you can imagine by midday they are struggling. So there are all of these small pieces that we put together that eventually have an impact.
Great. And Luke, likewise, how do you prioritize where the need is felt the most?
It's always a challenge, because the need is so massive. The stats that we see say that there are something like 262 million children that don't go to school every day. And, we're an organization now that is receiving lots of requests. Okay, a lot of them are through social media to support them. But for us, the way that we work is by identifying partners on the ground. And that's where we've collaborated so well with Humanity First, because their model is that they're able to put teams on the ground. We're a team of two, and we can't do that. But we need to make sure that, the need is massive, but we, as an organization and as a sort of duty of care to our donors, we need to make sure that the team on the ground can facilitate the project and can coordinate the logistics and make sure that the school bags actually get into the hands of the children to give them that benefit. So a lot of our priority is actually driven by the partners that we can work with, who can pull the strings at their end and make sure that the projects actually do what they're intended for. We're very lucky. We work with some amazing partners, of which Humanity First are fantastic at supporting and providing that team on the ground that's so important for us, because we can't go out and facilitate projects, and if we did, I know that I would be completely ripped off and projects would cost a fortune. Whereas working with teams on the ground that know the local knowledge and the culture and the customs and the language and the financial constraints that we have. That's the best way that we
Right.
can work. And also it's extremely empowering to the charities that are on the ground, that we can support them, and then they can be seen to be supporting their own local people.
Right, and I think, as you just alluded to there, Luke, it seems that when organizations, charities in this case, work together, the impact is much more significant. And so perhaps if you're able to tell us a bit more, Fazil and Luke, about how you do work in collaboration, and the impact you've seen, um, as opposed to working purely on a separate individualistic basis, and also how you hope to maybe sustain that very strong partnership that you formed as well. So Fazil, maybe you could start with you on that one.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, Luke keeps saying that he has a small charity. I have to say, some of the best charities I've ever worked with are the small ones, because they're focused and they're dedicated. And
Right.
School in a Bag is a small and beautiful charity, and they're very good at what they do. So, I came across, I have to say, we first met up in our boardroom probably 6 years ago, and I was struck by his story, because Humanity First had also been heavily involved in that tsunami response in Banda Aceh and parts of Indonesia. So that's how we started to collaborate. I think we invited, I asked a youth organisation to invite them along to an event that the Mayor of London at the time was doing, and from there we just grew, and it's part of a program of work that we do. As Luke said, we have feet on the ground in 60 odd countries,
Right.
and even countries like Georgia in Eastern Europe, we've been working together. In parts of Africa, we've been working together, and this is just going to grow.
Great. And Luke?
Yeah, we I think one of the first times I heard about Humanity First, we were giving school bags to an organization called Water Survival Box, and Humanity First were looking to be the recipient at both ends. So we piggybacked in on a consignment, but we've worked solely on school bag projects in Guinea-Bissau in West Africa,
Right.
in Georgia, and we're packing bags next week for a refugee camp in Antwerp in Brussels. And so where the partnership works so well is that we work with a fabulous contact called Mohsin in Georgia. And as Fazal alluded to, we were working and pinpointing the communities that are very rural. And sometimes if you were to draw lots of different rings in a very poor country, where different charities are helping, there are little pockets and gaps that the rings don't sort of go over. And I think Humanity First are brilliant at finding those organizations and those communities that really need help. So we know that in Georgia, they rank the sort of social status of communities and families on a point system.
Mhm.
And I think it's something like 10,000 points was deemed to be communities needed help. And Humanity First found families that scored 1,000 points and 500 points. So the need there was massive. And so, by shipping our bags out, and then the Humanity First team on the ground were able to go and distribute those bags. And sometimes it was a 5-hour drive in, 2 feet of snow to get to those communities where, the children were just waiting for their bags. So that's the sort of the dedication that when two charities really want, work together, we can absolutely combine and make a very big difference. And I think that's our model is certainly based on collaborations with charities. We couldn't do it any other way. And when you get two working together, it's brilliant. And equally, we work with some very small, very budget stricken charities in Africa, and normally their budget would be trying to buy some pens and paper and some items. And if we can come in and say, actually, we can fund those, it's amazing that little bit of budget then gets freed up to maybe fund another teacher or build another classroom or a toilet block. And so again, these collaborations are massively important for not just supporting in education, but the wider aspect of education, and sometimes the wider aspect of the communities themselves.
Super. Now, I think it's clear that both of you have got extensive experience in your respective charity work. And if I was to ask you, is there one particular inspiring experience or story that stands out for you in terms of the impact and the effect that your great work has had on the ground in many of these deprived areas where there are so many disadvantaged children and students benefiting from your work? What might that be? So Fazal, is there a particular experience or inspiring story that stands out for you in your many years of work with Humanity First?
God, I could give you 100 stories.
We
But
probably would need another show for it, I admit.
all right, I'll give you one. I'm going to Gambia in a week and a half.
Okay.
And actually, we started doing scholarships for students a couple of decades ago, and one of our there was a shortage of trained medical staff in the Gambia, so we were giving scholarships to students who were going into medicine. And one of the guys was from a poor village in the north bank of the Gambia in the Borough region, and we got him through school, we got him through higher education and into university. He's now volunteering with Humanity First in the Gambia. He trained as a doctor, he served for a few years, he's now the president's physician. And that
Wow.
shows you
Wow.
a child going from a rural community, giving him the aspiration and the ambition and
Yeah.
the tools and the resources to be able to take that on, and then seeing the fruit of that when he's now serving his country at almost the highest level.
Super. Luke, how about yourself?
Well, Fazal, that's amazing. And I think, one of the things that we're just really hopeful for is that our beneficiaries go on to become, successes in their country, which is, would be amazing. And so many of the children that we support want to actually take on vocations that give back to their community that they grow up in. They want to become teachers and doctors. But I've got a couple of very quick stories. Our very, very first project in Swaziland, we were told that if the children got to school, they were given one pencil to last them for the entire academic year. And when we present, we joke and we get our box of 12 pencils out and say we give children a 12-year supply of pencils, and they cost us 35 pence. So each pencil is less than 3p. And, it doesn't matter what age you present to, whether it's 90-year-old men or women in Rotary or in a will, or 4-year-old children in a primary school, they grasp exactly what a pencil is and how much, how much 3p can mean to these communities. But also our first project in Tanzania, whenever we work with a new partner, we always do a small project for a number of reasons. One, it becomes manageable for them, but two, we're safeguarding ourselves on a financial level. A project that could just go awry. So we did 50 school bags, and within 3 weeks, we got 50 images of the children wearing the bags on their fronts, and we got a full report. And then there was a little note at the bottom that said, Luke, we've got 24,000 Tanzanian shillings left. What should we do with it? So I immediately thought, gosh, that's a lot. And then I worked out it was about £3. And I said to our partner, I said, well, Willard, you've absolutely fulfilled the brief. This is fantastic. We'll certainly look to do another project. You've just done 50 bags. How many bags would you like in your next consignment? He said 30,000. And we've now fulfilled about 12,000 of those bags, so we are working towards it. But that's one area in Iringa in Tanzania with one charity, and that's the outreach that they have, and that's the number of children that they know would benefit from a school bag. So the need for us is absolutely massive, and we're just doing our best to chip away, really.
I mean, that's amazing, and thanks to both of you sharing those stories. I imagine that with great success comes great pressure as well, and I imagine in terms of, as you just alluded to, Luke, that will be a challenge that you'll be facing to meet that demand. Are there any sort of other challenges that you think you face as charities in your own right? So, Fazal, with Humanity First, what would you say is your main challenge right now?
I suppose two things come out in low income regions. We take it for granted. You take your kids to school, and they have great teachers, great resources, and they're safe. And then you pick them up and you bring them home. that security and safeguarding is not always there in many parts of the world. And so safeguarding is the first challenge that we find, especially, we do a lot of work for orphans, trying to get them into education, and safeguarding is a major, major challenge for orphan children. But the other challenge we face is it's all very well building and equipping a school, but most schools, I would say the most schools that I've seen in Africa are staffed by unqualified teachers,
Right.
and their motivation is not always the same, and they don't have a target to aim at. They're just trying to do a 9 to 5 and get the kids through basic education. So we're putting a lot of effort now into trying to train and empower teachers. We're doing that in Mali, where we've built 7 schools, and now in Bamako we run teacher training before each school year starts. But it's a long journey. Those are the two big challenges that we see.
Right, so safeguarding and the issue of unqualified teachers. And Luke, with yourself, what would you say is your main or big challenge?
Well, I mean, it's amazing listening to Fazal, because the scope of their work is so big. We're very niche. We focus in on one thing, and that one thing is so important. Getting to the children. So demand is our biggest challenge. And if I'm being really blunt, it's money. Because we've got the infrastructure. We've now got 122,528 school bags to children into 47 different countries, and we've got teams on the ground that are just constantly waiting for us to try and raise that next amount of money to fulfill the next project. And it's frustrating that we've got the infrastructure there. And I joke when I present, and I say, if anybody gave me £5 million now, I could have it spent in 5 minutes. Because the demand is right there. And I presented to a couple of Rotary clubs last week, and she said, we're in Rotary, what could we do for you? What's the best thing we could give you? And I felt quite rude. And I said, I'm going to be blunt, we just need money, because with money we can provide children and we can transform their lives. Without it, we can't. And so that's our biggest challenge. There are others, but as a small charity, we're constantly getting requests for school bags, and it's very hard to write and say, well, I'm sorry, we'll add you to the list, but you're a long way down that list. So that's our biggest challenge. And new projects have logistical headaches and things, but in the end, you overcome those, and you persevere, and you get the bags to the children, and you forget the difficulties that you've had getting them there, because those photographs that come back with smiling children just make it all worthwhile.
Well, I just find it amazing, Luke, that you are in School in a Bag, a 2-man band, isn't that right? And yet the amount of work that you've achieved, I'm just echoing what Tom has said on the chat, is the impressive work that you're engaged in and the great impact it's having. Is upping your recruitment an option, do you think, at the moment? Would you need to employ more staff to meet that demand? Is that feasible?
Not really. I mean, we've survived COVID. We're an organization that runs our own fundraising events to sustain us, and one of those is a music festival, which we've had to cancel twice. It's a 3-day event, raises about £80,000 for us. So we've lost money. We did have 5 employees at one point, but upping, can we afford to pay those people? Because we're not volunteer led. We do pay ourselves a salary, and the Humanity First model is very different to our model. If we were to bring in volunteers, some volunteers come in with good intentions, but there's no regularity to them. So I think COVID has certainly changed our model, and for now, actually we've moved so many things online and do things digitally, whereas we used to drive around the country seeing people. Actually, for the team of 2 of us, we're busy, and we're making those changes. But yes, as and when we can afford to pay more people, then we will be able to grow, and we'll be able to designate someone to schools again, and we'll be able to probably consider proper fundraising managers and that sort of as we grow. So but we're a 2-man team that coordinates, but we have hundreds of people on the ground with our various charities around the world who are moving heaven and earth to fulfill and make projects happen. So it's absolutely a massive team effort, and we're the lucky two that get to pull the strings.
Absolutely, gentlemen. We're almost coming to the end of the show, and I just wanted to squeeze in just one more question, and I suppose it's a combination of two. The first is, what would be your key message this evening you'd like to share with our listeners, and if people would like to know more about the work that you do and maybe support your charities, how and where can they get in touch? So Fazil, first with you, please.
Yeah, I mean, my key message, I assume all of your listeners are teachers, would be grateful for what you've got. And it's the same when I talk to doctors in this country. Once you've
Absolutely.
spent time in those regions, you realize how pragmatic people have to be and how they make little scraps go so far. So we should be grateful for what we've got in this country. Like School in a Bag, actually, we've only got 2 full-time staff in this country. The rest of us are volunteers, but we're fortunate to have quite a big network of volunteers to call on. If people want to find out more or get involved, then you can follow us on Twitter or Facebook at HFI 1995, and you can go on our website humanityfirst.org and volunteer or get involved or donate as you see fit. We've got probably 50-60 schools in this country who raise funds for us and donate books and pencils and all kinds of stuff. So there are lots of ways to get involved.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Fazil. And Luke, with this, a key message and ways that people can find out more and maybe offer support.
Well, we're certainly echoing what Fazal says. Be grateful for what you've got, and we've all just gone through that homeschooling experience and realised, the absolute amazing job that teachers do. And I think knowing that there are lots of teachers listening and schools out there, we also are a wonderful charity for schools to support, because it's children helping children, and we can present to schools anywhere around the world now that we can do it all by Zoom. So you're trying to get more and more schools on board and fundraising for us is always a real treat to be able to do that. I think one of the things that I would love to see, and this is pie in the sky thinking, but as my children grow older, they're 7 and 9, but they're growing up so quickly, you start to see, some of the issues that teenage children are facing. And I would love to think that we might get to a point in time where we could send groups of students from this country out to the developing country schools for maybe a 6-week block. Wouldn't it be amazing if we could send, for term 3 in the summer term or whatever it was, you won't be in school in Yeovil, you're going to be in school in Tanzania. And, the government will fund it, and you'll go out and you'll spend 6 weeks in there, because I could guarantee that so many of the problems we're seeing with teenagers in this country would probably disappear if they spent some time out in those countries, because those children have nothing and they're so willing to learn. And that's what I'd love to see. Not really a message, but a wish. But if you would like to support us, on Twitter we're at schoolinabag1, and our website schoolinabag.org is fairly new and comprehensive and explains how you can work with us and how you can donate. You can donate school bags in all sorts of different varieties and shapes and forms. So schoolinabag.org, or find us through our social media channels.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, both of you, for sharing some really inspiring stories and the great, fantastic work that you continue to do. It really is inspiring. We'll certainly, when I'm tweeting out about the show later on with the link to the podcast, I will put out the details that you've just given to your respective organization. But thank you so much, Luke and Fazil, for joining. Keep up the amazing work, and all the best to School in a Bag and Humanity First in your present and future ventures. Thank you so much for being with me tonight. Really is appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we're coming to the end of the show. Tonight's show will be available as a podcast shortly. What a show it's been. A huge thanks to my special guests, Farida Chan, Fiona Moss, Luke from School in a Bag, and Fazil from Humanity First. And of course, a massive thanks to you also for joining. It's been an absolute pleasure. Do please help us spread the word. keep tuning into our shows. Catch up on our previous episodes on our website, ttradio.org, and follow us on social media. Reminder, our Twitter handle is @ttradio2021, #TTRadio. Believe it or not, we do have another show coming on tonight, the aptly named Late Late Show with Christopher Valls at 10 p.m. He'll be looking at, amongst other things, supporting Year 12 students in preparing for UCAS applications and the highlights from today's Education Select Committee. I think that's tongue-in-cheek there from Christopher. So if you do want to host with Teachers Talk Radio, you do have a chance still. Please come to our website, ttradio.org, and get in touch with us. And who knows, you might be hosting your own show very soon. We're out of time. Thank you so much for being here tonight. I'll be back in a couple of weeks' time on Wednesday, the 7th of July. What would you like the show to be about? Please let me know. And if you'd like to be a guest, you know where I am. Just get in touch and let's get you on. For now, I wish you a very peaceful rest of the evening. Thanks and good night.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.